also, but so we're helping universities and companies basically own their AI infrastructure, right? And what that means is, well, once you see that, AI agents and, for certain workflows and, you know initiatives are necessary, then and like basically people need sort of little convincing of that, right? Like that's very clear to all of us, right? We have a number of workflows, a number of tasks, so you're like, this could probably be automated, right? So once you sort of see that, then the next question is, okay, well, what am I going to use in order to automate that, right? And basically the whole sort of market and so on is overwhelmed, right, with things that say, okay, well, because you need agents, and like that's true for everybody, then you need to be locked into my system, right? And that's basically that's the underlying message across the board. Now, that doesn't really have to be the case, right? And there are very obvious ways in which that is just not the case, right? Because you have, at the same time that an organization is sort of telling you, okay, well, you need to be locked into my ecosystem, my LLMs, my little world. Well, that company is struggling, right, at a higher level to compete with other AI companies that are trying to do the same thing, right? Because at the very top, there's just very much an arms race, right? And the competition is very fierce, to the point that you see people like Sam Altman saying, this is converging on the price of electricity, right? You have open source LLMs, a lot of these things coming out of China, but including open weights and so on, that are excelling, right? So there is a very interesting sort of confluence of factors here, right? So, you need AI. Okay, cool. Everybody agrees. Okay, well, now you need to be locked into my ecosystem. So, why is that the case, right? And basically we're in that world. So what we do is we say, okay, because you don't need to be locked into anybody, because there is effectively a way to sort of benefit from the latest LLMs, right? And every LLM has different trade-offs in terms of price, in terms of reasoning abilities, and so on. We are basically an infrastructure that allows you to plug into any one of them, okay, for any given purpose, right? And in a given system, you may say, okay, well, I have these applications running on Claude, Opus, or something. Others I have running on Gemini. Others I have running on some thing from OpenAI, whatever. Something I may be running locally, actually, in my basement, right? Or increasingly on my cell phone. So that's what we are doing. It's basically doing the AI infrastructure that actually allows you to be what we call LLM agnostic, right? Where you can use any language model and so on for any purpose. So when you create an agent, you say, okay, well, the LLM, the language model, is just the brain. Okay, but I still have to worry about the arms and the legs and all this kind of stuff. And I don't need to be locked into any one LLM in order to build an agent. And that's basically what we do. Our entire platform, our entire initiative is basically helping folks build agents, AI agents, and then web applications that are devoid of any vendor lock-in. Okay, because you can use any AI backend, any sort of LLM. We also give you the code as well. So you're not even locked into us, right? And that's basically what we're doing. And that's why that message resonates well with people across academia and industry. We even have this stuff with the federal government, like certain agencies and so on, right? Because that need for agents is ubiquitous. And when you don't have the vendor lock-in, say, well, you can do a lot. So I can, go into some examples.
No, that's fantastic. I mean, one thing I learned as a kid, my mom always told me is never put all your eggs in one basket, right? That's one thing you don't do, right? Because again, you don't know if one company next, especially how fast technology is moving, how AI is moving so quickly that one day one company's here, and as you know, as we heard the other day, Anthropic released their code accidentally, and what happens, and or could you talk about also what other features like Mentor AI? I think it's such a great feature that you guys do at IBL. Tell us a little more about some of the tools that you guys have and features that you specifically for higher education.
Yeah. So basically, so when we look at let's say we're a horizontal platform for agents, right? And when people say horizontal, there's sort of this distinction between horizontal and vertical platforms, right? And vertical platforms will those folks are generally saying, well, I have an agent that does tutoring really well, right? Or admissions really well, or content creation really well, right? And those are what we call sort of the vertical people. And then there's the horizontal ones where you say, well, if I've broken down an agent right into its core elements, let's say the language model, sort of the prompts, right, or the agent's MD, whatever, the tools, so maybe the data that it can access to. Like if I break down an agent into its building blocks,
Hmm.
then I can say it's basically like we can make cars. Yeah, I have a car that drives you to the grocery store, but it also drives you to your friend's house. It can also, drive you to church, right? It can drive you wherever, okay? Because it's a horizontal platform, right? You can have agents that are very purpose built for any one of these applications. Okay, so what we do is basically provide this kind of horizontal platform, right? Where we're working with people in admissions departments who say, okay, well, I'm going to start by looking for students who are talking on social media about something that I can relate to a major that I want to get students to be enrolled in. Okay. Or the tutoring case is the most obvious one. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to have a companion in my Brightspace or my Canvas or my Blackboard or my Moodle, right? And that's going to have an understanding of the student, and it's going to be just sort of adapting the entire learning in real time. There is this kind of like one course per student. Okay, we have some for operations as well. Marketing is a very common one. So entire sort of content pipelines where you say, okay, well, this is my knowledge base or my branding identity. This is kind of the message that I want to cross, right? And then sort of handling all the social media for it is very straightforward. So triaging, sort of responding for customer support and so on. So we have cases across the board right there. And why? Well, because we're a horizontal platform, right? And that horizontal platform says, really, if you have an LLM that's smart enough, then you really beat out anybody who's building vertical agents on worse LLMs, right? So let's say somebody comes and says, okay, I have an agent that's really good for admissions. Okay, it's going to be running on, let's say, Claude Sonnet. Okay, it's not the most amazing LLM. It's not bad in terms of pricing. Okay, it's going to be running on Claude Sonnet. It's relatively, it's good. It's okay. Okay. Now I have this workflow, and I have perfected it, right? I have my prompt, right? And the way that I try to drive the behavior of that agent is just it's so intricate and it's so adjusted to what I want. Okay, you have
Yeah.
a okay.
I'm sorry, Miguel, just real one question.
Oh, large language model. Sorry,
Yeah,
sorry.
so yeah, so an LLM is a large language model, like a couple of the big ones, the frontier labs, like let's say Claude and ChatGPT, and those are the large language models.
Yes, yes, yes. So sorry about that. So when we have an agent, basically the agent is, let's say you have I don't know, one way to sort of, it's like to relate it to a anthropomorphize it a little bit, or relate it to a person. The analogy is not perfect, but the LLM is basically the brain, right? So okay, let's say I create this kind of person, weird language, right? But I create this person, and I have a brain, right? So when ChatGPT first came out, and we had sort of GPT-3, okay, this was a couple of years ago, that brain, the quality of the responses of the LLMs was terrible compared to what you have available today. Okay? And it's just like, well, why? The LLM improved. The application, chatgpt.com, looks pretty much the same. The quality of the responses has improved. Why? Because the language model, the large language model, has improved in parameters, in reasoning abilities, and so on. So we're at a point where the LLMs, there are many of them, and they keep increasing in size and in price, and so on. And you want to be able to switch. You want to say, okay, I want to create agents, and I want to have different LLMs for different kinds of agents.
Right, right. And just to explain a little more, Michael, when what we're seeing now is we're seeing these frontier models, labs like OpenAI and Anthropic. What they're doing is the bigger the better, right? So the more that you train these large language models, the idea is that the AI and it will be much smarter. And so what Miguel just mentioned is we went from ChatGPT 3, early large language models to not what we have now, and they're training it with more and more and more information. We're feeding that information to these large language models so that they get smarter and better at what they're doing. Miguel,
Exactly.
if you can tell us about if you can tell us a little bit about some of the people that you have worked with, like Kaplan, Syracuse University, NVIDIA, SUNY, Google, and George Washington University. Because, for us in higher education, we are pretty much stuck to our own institutions. We sometimes don't know what's happening in other schools, and you have a bird's eye view of what's happening because again, not only do you work with higher ed,
Yeah.
you work with corporate. So what I find it interesting to know what are other education institutions and corporate companies, what are they doing successfully, and what do you see their leaders doing that is different from other institutions?
Okay. Okay. So that's perfect. And maybe we can talk about higher ed, for example, right?
Mm.
So Syracuse University is Syracuse very very interesting. And there are videos right from Jeff Rubin, their chief digital officer, basically talking about this. Very very smart because Syracuse University says, okay, we're gonna have agents basically across the board. Okay, and this is mainly to automate a lot of the routine tasks. Right? Nobody's talking about automating things where we humans do really well and or we're very necessary. Okay, so it's always like what is the stuff that we are not getting to. So let's say advising is always a common case, right? Because you say, okay, well, if you look at how many thousands of students you have, how many thousands of courses do you have, how many advisors you have on staff, how close are the personal relationships that the few advisors on staff are having with everybody, right? How closely can the few advisors on staff completely advise every student based on their own backgrounds and their own needs and their own concerns and so on? And the reality, you talk to any of one of these staff, and like, I mean, of course, I cannot get to 1,000 to thousands of students, right, with all of this, right? I just don't really have the bandwidth at all. Okay. Best case scenario, somebody gets a few minutes per year for my time, but again, that is crazy. You understand? So you say, okay, well, what if you can so let's say there are agentic use cases over there, okay? And then you also look at let's say the TA example, okay? So the TA example, let's say a student, is going to maybe a student works during the day, they can't really make the office hours at this late at the pre-programmed time. Maybe you need some help at night. Okay, so who can I ask at night? And well, you can send an email and you'll get an answer the next day. It's like, okay, I mean, fine. If that has to be that way, okay. But if I can get some answers on the spot right now, then that is very helpful. Okay, now you look across the board. Financial aid, for example. Look, many people obviously, you struggle with the tuition and so on. Can I talk to? I've been working during the day. It's 10 p.m. I need to figure out a plan of how am I going to pay for this thing. Can I talk to somebody? It's like, no, you got to call somebody during the hours, right? And maybe that's how the person is busy, right? So, okay, there are a lot of cases where, let's say the current, never mind talking about AI, let's say the current system maybe doesn't really get all the way there, okay? Because just there's no let's just talk about the times. It's like, look, at 10 p.m. very few people are going to be available to answer your questions, and there are many thousands of students. So you start to have AIs, right, for these areas. And then you say, okay, if I want to have AIs for, let's just say, I don't know, let's just say 10,000 students. Okay, if I want to have AIs for 10,000 students, then, and that means that I want to have 10,000 accounts. Okay, and I want to have maybe agents for the different courses or for different degree programs and so on. Well, you're going to look at the main price that these LLM companies are giving, which is $20 per user per month. Maybe you get a deal, okay, but the base price is $20. All right, so $20 per user per month. Okay, you have 10,000 students. Now you're paying $2.4 million a year. Okay, that's kind of crazy, right? You're going to be, let's just say you talk to, let's say without naming any names, okay, but let's say a big AI lab provider, $20 per user per month is their price. You say I have 10,000 students, so cool, that's $2.4 million a year. Okay, now what's happening there? Well, that your data, by the way, is being stored in that company's under that company's control and those company servers. Okay. It's that data is not really being controlled by you. Maybe you get some agreement where they promise you that they won't train their models with it. Okay. There are a couple of problems with that. First of all, there have been holes in those arguments because there have been leaks and whatever. Two, you are missing out from another LLM company that is coming out with an innovation that maybe makes the first LLM company's products irrelevant. Okay. So if I go to, let's say, OpenAI, and I'm going to say, oh, I'm going to do your $20 per user per month plan for my 10,000 students. It's going to be $2.4 million a year. Okay, what about the fact that Anthropic just dropped something that's really helpful? Maybe I really like something that Anthropic just did, or maybe I really like something that Google just did, right? Because Google has great stuff. Well, you paid the OpenAI deal. Anthropic and Google are invisible to you. You pretend they don't exist anymore. Okay, you bought in an expensive price at an expensive price. Now, meanwhile, the CEO of OpenAI is telling the rest of the world that LLMs are basically almost commoditized for many cases. The price of LLM is converging on the price of electricity, which means that LLMs are basically going to be as cheap as it gets, right? Just the price of electricity. So the CEO is saying that stuff. Meanwhile, the university is getting locked in a very expensive plan that prevents them from being able to tap into other LLM companies. So the CEO is having kind of a commoditization discourse, but then the university is getting sold a monopoly price. So
Mm.
you're like, what is going on there?
Right.
Right? And what folks like Syracuse University are doing, because they know the landscape, they know every company is doing this, right? OpenAI is doing this, Anthropic's doing this, and so on, because they're trying to get revenue. So then what somebody on top says is like, okay, so that's interesting. So you LLM companies have two prices. One is for the business people. That's going to be the $20 per user per month. Okay. But then they're also going to turn around these LLM companies and they're going to have developer prices. That's the LLMs are converging on the price of electricity audience. Okay. And I can screen share for a sec
Sure. Yes, you can
if
go
you
ahead.
would like.
I,
So this is basically okay. If you're in the $20 per user per month, okay. So you're in the $20 per user per month plan. You see my screen here?
yes.
And $20 per user per month, you're paying $2.4 million a year. Okay. But when you look at a developer, what they offer to a developer is 20 cents per million tokens.
Mm.
Okay. So what does that mean? Well, it means that if you say, okay, I'm going to tap into this much cheaper price, you may end up paying per year, I don't know, $10,000 in LLMs, no longer $2.4 million. Okay. So what we do is we say, okay, we're going to build applications that take advantage of the developer prices. We're going to
Um,
provide those to the universities. How's that? Right. So now when you have, to quote the College Board, this is LLM pricing arbitrage. It's like, no, we just know that there are developer prices and then there are business prices. And there's nothing in anybody's terms, right? Because while the OpenAI education people are trying to market to the business audience at the universities, they're also trying to market to developer audiences. Okay.
I
These
see.
prices are public. This is not secret. Well, we happen to be developers, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to take advantage of these prices. Now, Syracuse University, and there is this video, right, from Jeff Rubin, their chief digital officer, who explains this pretty well. You can see it from our site, just Syracuse University over here. But what these people are doing is they're saying, okay, I'm going to tap into everybody's underlying APIs. I understand the commoditization discourse, and I'm just going to create agents that allow me to use LLMs from everybody. Okay. And in so doing, they go from spending millions a year to, maybe low hundreds of thousands. Okay.
That's
Or maybe
amazing.
thousands.
Yeah, thank you for that clear explanation because for me, I didn't understand about the developer pricing model versus the subscription model. So that really helps me understand how you are benefiting from using a developer model to obtain those prices at low cost. So that's a
Yeah.
really clear explanation. At this moment, I wanna open up the room for questions because right now we're finalizing on the introduction part. So we learned a little bit about Miguel. We learned about what his company does. We learned about also the pricing model of going from a subscription model, as Miguel explained, purchasing, let's say, ChatGPT for $20 a month subscription versus paying, what was it you said, 20 cents per 20 million tokens or something?
20 cents per million tokens. And that metric is purposefully confusing because you're like, what the heck is a token? You can assume that 1 million tokens is like 750,000 words.
Mm,
So just to give you an example, we have this little price calculator, IBLAI/LM price calculator, if you're interested here. So let's just say you have 500 users. Okay, each user is going to message $10, 10 messages per user per day. Okay, you're like, okay, well, maybe during the week, some days are busier than others. Okay, so, and they're going to be detailed questions. Okay, now, if you see, let's say 500 users times 20 is, $10,000. Okay, that's like if you buy for 500 users a license, the $20 per user per month license, you're going to be spending $10,000. Okay, for this month. Okay, now what happens if you build on the developer prices? 500 users. Okay, well, if you're on this model, oh, you're paying less than $1,000. So you're going from paying $10,000 per month to $900 per month. Okay?
right.
So it's just this is basically this is the distinction. Okay?
Mm,
So you are on one hand it's like if people price these LLMs like a monopoly, okay? If people price this like a commodity, okay, but these are separate conversations. Many business people and academia and so on, the party line is okay, you ought to buy the business prices. But if the university says, hey, I know what you're doing, I know you're going to other people and offering them way cheaper prices, then you get that degree of ownership that is financial and very good.
the other thing too, Miguel, that this brings up a problem, and we're seeing this a lot now, is that many institutions, even within CUNY and elsewhere, faculty members and students are going on their own and purchasing their own subscription models, right? And so people have to faculty. I've seen faculty members go in and get a subscription model for ChatGPT or whatever, and same thing with students. Now the issue is that you don't have a unified approach, right? If you're an institution and you want to lead your school in the right direction, you do a unified approach, just like you're describing, right? As opposed to having everyone go their own separate ways individually, right?
Yeah.
That's not what you want here.
Yeah, and there are a couple of reasons for that, right? So on one hand, I mean, there's the obvious equity argument, right? It's like, what is the message that the institution is saying if they say, okay, rich students can pay for nice LLMs, poor students can pay for bad LLMs? Like, that's such an obvious example of like inequity and disparity that is like, it's so gross, right?
Right,
So if you come from a financial disadvantaged background, you can use worse LLMs, which are just exponentially worse. But if you're rich, you can use a nice LLM. So very obvious inequity right there.
right.
Now, that's one argument. The other ones, and there are a couple others, is really from a data standpoint. It's like, why would let's say CUNY, for example, CUNY has its own, let's say, generative AI platform, hypothetically, and so on, right? And all of your data sources are connected, right? So everything from what you have in the student information system to what you have in the LMS, everything that you know about me as a student, my interests, my backgrounds, and so on, is organized by you. Okay, if I have an agent, if I'm interfacing with some language model, it's helpful for me to be talking with an agent that knows that my major is computer science, that I just started, studying here, and these are my grades so far, and so on, because I don't have to restate things. And that actually is adaptive learning and a personalized experience. So you really want the university's generative AI agents to have access to the data about the students, because that's
Mhm.
sort of what makes it useful. Like if I should not go and have the same experience on my Uni platform as I would on like, blank chat GPT. No, like my Uni platform should know what my major is, what am I enrolled in, and so on. What am I struggling with? Because that way it can actually be more helpful. So
Right.
now you say from the Cooney standpoint, okay, so how can we achieve that? Well, you have to have some ownership here, right? You have to see where's your data going. So this is the other argument here. One is financial. The other one is if Cooney has ownership over this, then you can have no qualms about integrating it with your data because your data is staying under your control. You
That's an
know?
excellent point. That's an excellent point. In and also, bringing centralizing all that data to one place so that now you can really leverage all that data, like you're mentioning, what are my students' interests, what they're majoring in, et cetera. And from there, you can really leverage that data and make the right decisions for your students. I want to pivot now because again, we've been talking a lot about what your company is doing, and how you approach the issue of pricing and that thing. But I really want to ask you some more difficult questions
Oh yeah.
regarding the challenges that we're facing right now in higher education. And I welcome the audience to post their questions, or if you want to jump in and raise your hand and ask a question. But I want to lead off the questions on challenges of higher education. And one of them for me has been this one for me is a big one, and I feel that in higher education we have been moving away from the humanities. I feel that we're seeing less and less interest or importance on the humanities. And once AI came out, and we're realizing that the skills that were being this that the skills that the market dismissed were the ones that the machines could not do. Uh, Writing, communication, and those sort of things. Those are the skills that we want our students when they graduate to be able to get a job. These are the soft skills that they need to have to get a job. And for me, it seems that we're moving away a little bit from the humanities. What are your thoughts on that? And how can we put the spotlight back on the humanities now that we're seeing that humanities are key, integral part of what our students should be doing now with the if we do introduce AI into the curriculum.
I mean, I think humanities are have I don't think they have been like they're more important now than they have been in the last arguably decades, right? So right now, if you see, I mean, I studied computer science and electrical engineering, and that I think maybe was for a little bit in some ways it's another era, right?
Mhm.
You just say, okay, I need sort of deep specialization on a topic, okay, and right now, well, deep specialization on arguably any topic is outmatched by a language model. Obviously, I can any of these language models know more about computer science than I do. Okay, so I don't. There is no there. It would even be. It even sounds like a joke to say, okay, well, I'm always gonna sort of be at the forefront, right? Versus these LLMs, and these LLMs. The thing about these LLMs is that they're accessible to anybody for relatively very low prices compared to my time and my availability and so on, right? So I think if you say, okay, so what makes, on one hand, let's just, I guess, talking about the professional applications of anybody's degrees in the market, right? Beyond the overall pursuit of learning, which is obviously another part of the university's mission and so on. But if you just say from the market standpoint, kind of what's useful, right? What is worth somebody working hard to pay you for, right? And I think deep specialization on any one topic is not as necessary anymore, right?
Mm.
Like, here's the thing: you still need to know, right? You still need to know sort of what's going on, and you need to understand that. Look, you're not going to be subservient to some AI, so you have to understand the larger problem, right? But I think right now that reduced need for hyper specialization on any one topic is augmented by an actual demand and need to be operating across the board, right? So right now in our team, for example, look, our front-end engineers now are also back-end engineers. Okay, maybe that sounds reasonable. Okay, cool. They're also product owners. Oh, okay, interesting. They're also project managers, right? Because they have to now interface with the customers. Oh, you understand you have to do some marketing stuff as well, right? So you have to understand what resonates, right? So basically, everybody becomes a little bit of a renaissance man in a way,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And if you see, okay, well, what expands your mind, right, to be able to even first of all have an interest in that, and two, have that ability, right, to talk to people and to understand problems and sort of put in all these random building blocks in order to solve the problem. I mean, obviously the humanities are probably outmatched, right, in terms of
yeah.
that. So they're actually extremely important. Now, I think if I was studying again right now, like if I was going through if I was going to college again, I would still choose computer science just from a practical standpoint. It's like, look, there's this future of agents where they do everything, but okay, today, right now, I need to know some stuff. Okay, so I would still do computer science, but I would probably do maybe instead of computer science and electrical engineering, maybe computer science and history, right? Or computer science and philosophy, because that other part of the brain is and how to communicate and all of that stuff and how to see the world and understand things is even more important.
Yeah, the last speaker we had on last Friday, Jeff Sunheim from Google, he made such an insightful comment, and it stuck with me even to to today. He said that uh, when the camera came out, a lot of the painters at the time were scared that they were going to lose their jobs because now the camera uh, takes photos of you and it just looks exactly like you. But what he said was that when the invention of the camera, what it did for artists and painters, it removed the shackles because now they were no longer painting images that were realistic. They were now they shifted from expressionism and cubism, surrealism. They moved into new forms of art. And the other day, I was playing
Yeah.
around with vibe coding, and I'm also just like Miguel. Well, I graduated from Baruch as a computer science, and so I knew, at the time when I was taking 4 years at Baruch, I was doing C++, Java, and HTML and coding. And it's been a long time since I've dabbled in coding. And I said, I lost that skill. But I said to myself, you know what? Let me jump in and let me dabble now on vibe coding. And for those of you who don't know what vibe coding is, basically you're prompting the ChatGPT or whatever model that you're using, and you're saying, okay, build me this and create the code for a video game, and it will create the code for you. And that's what the term vibe coding means. But so when I was vibe coding an application, I said, I need an application that will help faculty members find workshops, something like that.
Mm,
And what it did for me, Miguel, this was mind blowing for me because the obstacle or the moat was my lack of coding. Once
mm,
that was removed, I was now able to code like any professional coder, right? And it was doing all the code for me in seconds.
yeah.
So what it did for me was it opened my mind to now I had to think about like how you just were describing. I had to now think about, okay, so which type of profiles is this app going to need? Student profile is going to need an educator profile, an admin profile. So now my brain started to think about all these other possibilities, and I had not planned for any of this.
Mm,
So for me, that was eye-opening because
yeah.
now something that was prevented me from creating an app, now anyone can create an app because the AI will do it, create the code for you. But from this whole experience, the light bulb moment for me was now I had to think above and beyond the coding and think about how am I going to make this app successful?
Yeah. Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, it's a little bit. I think it's a little bit brutal and kind of uncomfortable when it hits our own like bread and butter. So let's say I as an engineer. It's a little. It's in a way it's kind of challenging to say, okay, well, and very humbling, right? Because all this stuff that you spend years trying to perfect is now no longer some skill that I can hoard, right? Or selectively distribute. It's like, well, now it's a lot more democratized. Okay, so that part is a little bit uncomfortable, right? Because it sort of pushes me to go beyond that, right? And say, okay, so well, once this area is basically a solved problem, because like you're saying, so now the bread or the bar for people to create applications is much lower, which means that in a way, well, my skills are necessarily they're not as scarce anymore, obviously. So
Right.
now it forces me to say, okay, zoom out and say, okay, I wanted to create an app and I maybe was a little bit tunnel too tunnel focused right into the coding part of it. But now I'm going to focus on maybe how can I make this more available to people, right? So you
Right.
go to the next level skill,
Right.
right? And then even that, then you go to marketing, and you're like, all right, so marketing, because those marketing people they're also faced with AI. So now it's like, hey guys, what are we doing here? Right. And then marketing used to be like, well, you're going to record some nice videos of yourself. They're going to be relatable. They're going to be friendly and so on.
Right.
You guys are saying, actually, no, we have the user generated content videos. They've also been automated away. Right. You see companies like Hagen doing it. So
Right.
it's a little bit daunting. So now you're like, all right, so software, the bar to developing this is much lower. Okay, I'm going to go to marketing. The bar to marketing is much lower. Okay, now what is the next thing? It's like, well, maybe instead of, if those two things are a lot easier now, then some of the previous constraints from the past are
Right.
maybe not as applicable. So now if I'm creating an application, instead of creating one application and then just distributing it to different audiences, maybe I can create now one application per audience.
Right. Right.
So yeah.
I'm sorry to stop you there, Miguel. Michael, I want to go straight to the chat because I see a question here. Michael's asking because I think he joined a little bit late. Can you real quick in a few sentences describe again real quick what does IBL does? What do you guys do? And just a quick little brief overview of what we spoke about earlier.
Oh, sure. Yeah. So basically, we allow you to come in here and create your own agents and applications. Okay. So if you come here and you say, okay, well, get started for free, you're redirected to an application where you can start to create these agents yourself. All right. And there's zero friction right there. Right. There is as you see that, no, there's a free plan where it can be free like for forever, right? There's some usage limits and so on. If you run out of credits, then you say, okay, well, I'm gonna have sort of $16 worth of credits, right? Basically to fund the external LLMs. But the point of this is you can come in and you can create any agents and so on. We're
Yeah.
also, and this is basically the base thing. If you would like to have this for your organization, which is to say kind of like let's say the Syracuse example or others where you say, okay, I want to have this entire system, not in the IBL servers, not with basically the IBL control. I'm going to have this in my own infrastructure. Then, that's what we can do, right? So I can show you something like basically a kind of agent, right? That you can come in and say, okay, well, let's be sort of a general purpose, but it's basically allowing you to create agents, um, and then have them be under your control.
I think, Michael, one good explanation also is that instead of putting all your eggs in one basket, let's say you go with the subscriber model and you pay $20 for, let's say, ChatGPT or Claude, instead of going that direction and just you're stuck with that model. In this case, if you go with IBL, you're not stuck to just that subscription model with one model, right? You now you have all the different types of models and you can play around with and switch between them. Not only that, you also take advantage of what Miguel mentioned earlier, which is the developer pricing, which is much cheaper to pay, if you go institutionalize the wide license is much cheaper than what you would pay for one of these subscription models.
Exactly.
Did I say that right, Miguel?
That's perfect. Yeah, that's perfect. And as you can tell, my background's in computer science. My marketing skills are not as great, right? But we're working on that.
Did that answer the question, Michael? Awesome, great, thank you.
Awesome.
I want to continue asking, but if anyone here has any questions, please feel free to jump in and either type them into the chat or open or turn on your mic. And Michael, you have a question? No? Okay, so my next question, Miguel, for you is again, with the challenges that we're facing in higher education, one of the things that I've seen recently was, we at City Tech and at CUNY, we have Brightspace, right?
Mhm.
That's our learning management system. That's what we use for our professors. Professors create their courses, they put them in the learning management system. The students go in there, they do the assignments, submit the assignments, they get a grade. The teacher provides a grade and feedback. Students go in and read the grade and the feedback, and that's in a nutshell what a learning management system is. Now, what happened not too long ago was Canvas, which is similar to Brightspace, is one of the top two learning management systems out there, well, along with Moodle. what Canvas did not too long ago is that they added these AI features to the learning management system. And let me see, one of them was the ability to create a rubric, the ability to do discussion summaries so that the professor can then grade the paper. The other one is a smart search, and then an AI teaching agent called Ignite AI, and to automate a lot of these tasks for the professor. My concern, and you tell me what your thoughts are, but my concern with automating a lot of these tasks is that we are removing the teacher's responsibilities as a human that our students, I'm sure our students will affect our students and how they if they find out that a professor is using AI to, let's say, automate the, let's say, grading or summarizing a lot of these discussions so that the teacher doesn't have to read through all of them. Now, from the other hand, I understand that it's a large task for professors who are teaching, let's say, 3 to 4 classes. Each class might have 20 plus students. But are we afraid that we're going to lose the humanity between teaching and student, that relationship that's bound on human relationship? Are we losing that in the for the cost of efficiency? What are your thoughts on that perspective?
I mean, okay, I would say so. My mom was a teacher, and I actually on weekends and stuff. I've been doing similar things for years. There is very very fond of the teacher and the educator role, from not only from a okay, here's like some like knowledge dispensary, right? Who's also going to grade my stuff and then give me a grade, and then I'm going to go to another course. I'm never going to have to think about that again, right? That's not from that standpoint, but much more of a sort of a role model and a mentor, right? And somebody who helps students basically zoom out and understand sort of the importance of what they're doing and what they're learning and how it's aligned with what is very much in the student's best interest. Okay, so if you see overall sort of the educator as this kind of mentor, leader, almost parental figure, kind of in the student's life,
Mhm.
then that's the ideal, right? And when someone's a little kid and they say, "I want to become a teacher when I grow up," that's always what they're thinking, right? They I want to transform people's lives. We have a lot of other teachers in our family, like a couple cousins and so on. Some of them in the New York public schools and so on. But when somebody is a little kid and they say, "I want to become a teacher or I want to become a professor," right? And you ask them why. I want to make a difference in people's lives and so on. Okay, cool. Now, fast forward to what actually happens, right? You talk now to a teacher or an instructor and so on, and if you say this thing, they're like, okay, do you live in the real world? Like, this is like completely delusional stuff. Like, I don't have any time for this, right? And they will cite a bunch of institutional reasons, right? Things all over, right? It's like, well, the students are not really interested in learning this, right? They're just cheating, right? My administrators and so on don't really understand that I don't like my time commitments and like and how complex and inane some of this stuff is. And the parents are another nightmare half the time, right? So this is just not the real world, right? And that's so you're like, okay, so why is that, right? Like, why is that? And I think that highlights, first of all, never mind AI or any sort of solutioning or whatever, but well, that's a real problem, right? And if we start with that problem, when we think about, okay, what are other ramifications of this? It's like, well, the ramifications of this are students don't half the time they don't understand why something in a course is relevant. Okay,
Mm.
like you see, like I don't know, I saw this like stand up skit by somebody the other day talking about they spend all this time learning about triangles, but they don't know how to like manage their finances. Okay, you can ideally learn both, right? But this is common right now. You see a lot of the questions that people have from society is like, well, universities have become very expensive. Okay, what is my return? How is what I'm learning today helping me become a better person or a better professional and so on? And it seems as though that question is just not really ever answered, right? You talk to students, you talk to instructors, you talk to then anybody in the industry, and they say, well, yeah, we're very busy. It's a little bit of an assembly line, and that's terrible. So now you're like, okay, so if it was not going to be an assembly line, what would you need? I'm like, well, I'm going to need more time. Okay. Nobody really says it's a good. I think it's a good industry. People are not motivated by greed. That's not why anybody gets in here, right? But that so no one. People rarely say, well, I need more money. No, that's not really an answer we hear. It's more like, okay, I need more time. Okay, you need more time. That's fair enough. What takes up your time right now? And at the end of the day, it's a lot of BS. It's a lot of stuff that you're like, why does that take that much? Right? Is if you look at, I mean, we can tell you all sorts of stories, right? Where time is it just goes into things that sort of make people very busy. But then you're like, what were the returns of this? And can
Mhm.
this thing be automated? Okay, because this is not even your primary mission. Your primary mission is to transform that student's life, right? And we're getting mired in these random workflows. Okay, some of them are important, some of them are not. Some of them are extremely manual, right? And you're like, well, can we use some AI, whatever, right, to take care of some of those automatable workflows? Okay, so for example, we could see this across the board, right? But if a student has a question about your notes, right, or the applicability of some course that you've been teaching for like 10 years or 15 years or whatever to the state of the world today, right? Let's say
Mhm.
I'm taking an operating systems course, okay, and it's interesting to maybe say, okay, when you're learning about the concepts of operating systems and so on, yes, it's very good to know that this is how computers were developed and this is how things were done in the 80s. But like maybe today, you can also articulate this to a Raspberry Pi or a little sort of computing device. So now you can learn to have your own AI under your control. Okay, there is a lot that can be done to free up time while allowing to emphasize the entire personal. And I don't think this is for tech companies to decide, right? Because obviously what do tech companies know? Like nothing, right? But it's more for the instructor to say, okay, so these are basically workflows that, yes, I'm open to AI automating. Oh yeah, but yeah, Michael or Jose.
No, no, no. That's a great yeah, no, thank you for that. That's usually the toughest question to answer is the balance between how much AI is too much AI and are we losing those human to human connections. I just have one last question and open up to anyone else who has any questions for you because I don't want to be the only one asking questions, but um, you know, just just a quick response. What for me, with AI, I was what has shocked me the most. What eh, what what has shocked me the most has been using an agentic browser, and I would say I won't mention the name of the browser for now. But to see opening an agentic browser for the first time and asking it to go into my Brightspace course and telling it to build me a course that's 100% accessible with ADA compliance. And for me, that was the biggest shock so far. Just to see that my this AI agent took over my computer, started building a course way better than I would ever done it, faster time. What about for you? What has been the most shocking thing that you have? Because you work in technology, this is what you do all day. In the last, I don't know, let's say 5 years, what has been the most shocking thing that has really scared you so far using AI?
Well, okay. Well, for from just overall or from let's say
Overall, what blew your socks off so far? Has there been a moment where you're like, oh my gosh, this is scary?
well, I mean, I think the cybersecurity implications are pretty serious. There was some branch of the Mexican government that not long ago got hacked, and they just lost. You imagine like a government branch sort of losing
Yeah.
all the data, right? So you basically hacking, right, and cybersecurity and so on has been traditionally a kind of an elite skill. A lot of people can throw a little script. Obviously the internet is full of like malware, right, and people trying to do things, but a high level of expertise has been always, you know, scarce. Right now, you have people, you see, even just over the last couple of weeks, right? There are common libraries.
We have Mythos. Anthropic just released Mythos, which is it's a tool that it's an AI agent that's going to go in and just see any vulnerabilities that other humans would never able to spot. And now with that tool, and they're not releasing it yet until
Yeah.
right, they're not really because of the again, like you're mentioning, the liabilities of these companies. If you release that to the public, imagine the mess hacking, the cybersecurity issues.
Exactly, but and that's but there are so many problems. Basically, not releasing Mythos for the latest LLM from Anthropic for a second is like I have a hole in the ship, right, and I'm putting my hand on it.
Just
Okay,
patching
there's
it.
a lot of water in here, so it's my hand is not that good, and it's gonna hold. You have like there are Chinese open source LLMs, right, that are in some ways already beating the benchmarks of Anthropic, right? So we can be here, oh, let's curtail the power of these LLMs. You have open source things that are accessible by the worst people you can think of
Hmm.
that have that exact mission. Even over the last couple of weeks, there have been two very serious sort of supply chain attacks in the internet across tools. The internet and everybody's applications are just basically scaffolded on top of common libraries that are used by every company in the world that you know, right? From like Google and Facebook to someone doing a side project for 2 minutes. Okay. There have been a couple of those libraries that hackers have infiltrated early on in the process. One of them, they went to the open source developer of one of those libraries with I think this was like the North Koreans. They went there with a fake company,
Mm,
okay, basically giving the developer some sort of like job or some sort of opportunity. They send them a link to meet. I don't know if it was on like Microsoft Teams. These people had replicated the entire interface of Microsoft Teams,
right.
right?
Mm.
So they send them a link to meet. It's a developer. So you we're not even talking about, I don't know, my grandma, right, being fooled by one of these like hackers with
Like
a
phishing or something.
yeah. So you're talking about like an engineer who's like, oh, okay, the engineer's gonna get a job, typical job like he would for anybody else. Okay, by a company wants to hire him and then says, join this Teams link or whatever.
Yeah. Yeah.
Teams link doesn't work. Like, oh, okay, or you need an update. You need an update. Like you haven't opened the app in a while. Click here to update. Extremely common stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
it was not that. It was malware. Now that developer, once they have downloaded that developer maintains pack applications for millions of people worldwide. Okay.
Right.
And there was one company, I think it was like $100 million revenue company. They got in some AI recruiting company. They got entirely hacked, entirely destroyed. Okay. Because one developer who maintains one of the thousands of libraries that company relies on got hacked.
Got
The
hacked.
supply chain let that hack go through. And now so many applications around the
Applications
world.
that's amazing. That's scary. I see a question, our first question from Professor Bulis. Professor Michael Bulis, I see your hand is up. You want to ask your question?
Yeah, I want to ask a question. My grandson is 5 years old, and he knows how to use the keyboard better than me.
Mhm.
Do you think, uh, like in the next 10 years, you're going to see schools, university? Because when I ask my grandson a question, he ran to the computer and type it, and he got the answer.
Mm.
So now, what he
Yeah.
knows nothing. You
Yeah.
understand? We just learn one, two, three, A, B, C. But he knows how to type better than me, as I said. Do you think in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years, there will be a school, university? And I continue, Jose, I didn't get the answer from you correctly when he said the social relationship between the teacher, the professor, and the student. I don't think, McGill, maybe I didn't understand what you said, but you didn't give an answer for that. What is the relationship between the professor, teacher in the school, university, and the student? It's going to be machine. As I said, my grandson can type. So maybe in next year, I'm going to tell him, hey, yo, boy, go to elementary school. I'm going to say, oh, grandpa, I know how to type and I get the answer from AI. I don't need to go to school. How do you see the future of human being?
Right, right.
And the relationship between me, my grandson, my student, forget about that. I'm an assistant professor in your school. You understand? And one more thing is just I noticed last term a student they post the home somehow they submit the homework is not solved by them, and I can sense that
Mm,
because I can sense the machine in it.
right,
And I am with the student for 2 3 weeks. I know who is that student because I'm a human being. I'm assuming I'm intelligent, so
right.
I can check that person and say, oh, wait a minute, that's not your solution, Mister.
Yeah.
You understand
Yeah,
how you like how do you see the world now? I see that you put in prices and stuff like
yeah,
that. Maybe I didn't attend your introduction about yourself. You are a salesperson. You would like to sell us this.
yeah.
And one more thing is just it's very high price. If we say $900 for the organization, and Jose has to pay that from his bucket for a month, time, let's say 10 as 90,000. Where this organization going to get the money? It's not your problem, McGill, but
Yeah.
that's a mafia. Allow me to say it, you know.
Yeah.
My problem in life that I talk straight, and I hope I didn't bother anybody.
Oh, no, no, no. Thank you for asking the question. I just real quick, Miguel, before you answer, I just wanted to say that again, the reason why we have these AI roundtable discussions is for everyone to come to the table and have a voice. And I think that's what's most important because I think that if, like Miguel was mentioning, if these companies just have all the power to do, and they have a lot of support from the politicians, right? Because whenever you go to these talks, these Senate meetings, they have a lot of their power and money is going to a lot of politicians. But I think what's very important about these talks is that we all come to the table to discuss these concerns, and we're able to at least express our fears and what's happening so that we're not just thinking about these things on our own and that we come together to just to talk about it because if we don't talk about it then we don't inform ourselves and we're not better prepared. So I think that's one of the reasons why I love doing these talks is because
Yeah.
again it gives everyone an opportunity, but I want to give Miguel an opportunity to answer those questions.
Yeah. I mean, so I think that this is so. I think first of all the role of the educator, which I think it's even more important as basically an overall mentor of the student. Okay, and say, okay, I'm teaching you some stuff like some hard skills, yes, right, but I am the teacher ought to be almost a role model, right, in the student's life, right? And if you see that if that's the goal, because that's the goal that everybody who teaches said when they were young, okay, that they wanted to do. So if that's the goal, then I think AI is a helpful conduit to getting there, right? It's like, yes, you can go as a little kid, you can go and ask ChatGPT for simple addition things, right? Like you can remove your own need for thinking, um, but that's not going to last, right? And I think here it introduces a little bit the cheating thing. The cheating thing is a consequence of a temptation that exists for a reason that is not addressed, right? So many people are like, oh, AI allows people to cheat. Why is your course useful? And that's a harsher question, right?
Mhm.
Because people are like, well, of course my course is useful. Okay, why is it useful? It's in the degree program. Why is it in the degree program? Right? And it's like, and if you ask a learner, why is the course useful? And they can't really say why it's useful, then is it really fair to get mad at them for cheating? Right? Of course, morally, you should not cheat. That's bad, of course. But many times we're comfortable sort of answering the question downstream, right? You're like, look, I don't like to go to the gym. I don't like to work out either, and so on. Okay, it's obviously much more comfortable for me to not. But I have understood through empirical evidence and through people's explanations and so on that I can't just be like lying on the sofa eating donuts all day because then I'm gonna have another problem. okay, well, maybe that explanation has to be conveyed over here as well, right? So I think there is a great need for that. If you look at, at society and everything, I mean, like, it's just, we're very distracted. It's a mess. I mean, you can look at all the metrics, right, across society, right, in terms of like the psychological stuff and then the intellectual stuff, like the satisfaction overall. And there are a lot of problems, right? So when something like this comes around that basically shakes the room a lot, yes, it's maybe it's natural to say, okay, look, this is shaking the room. Let me hold on to like my little things here. Okay, and that's normal because we have a lot of obligations. But from a societal standpoint, and those who have leadership positions ought to convey that extremely clearly, and let's say at the university level. All right, it's, well, maybe look, at a company level, it's very clear. When I wanted our engineers to be super dived into AI, we made it extremely clear. Nobody asked, but I'm sure everybody's thinking it. It's like, you're not going to get fired. Okay. I can't. So you're not going to get fired because I have a moral commitment to you in the same way as you have a moral commitment to me, to do work. You're not going to get fired. But in other companies, many people are dragging their feet because, like, okay, as soon as I do this, the boss is going to come in and say, okay, I want to improve the bottom line and I'm going to be fired. So there is a little bit of a leadership need. And in the absence of that leadership, there's going to be also, it's a huge mess all around, right? Because people at the bottom, they're just, the ground shakes all the time.
Yeah, thank you for that.
One second, Jose. You didn't answer the first question, which is, there will be schools,
Yeah,
students go to school.
yeah. So if you look at Alpha,
If they need everything from AI and just to get the answer. And by the way, you know, I said before, I try chat GBT and give me the wrong answer from my experience in life. You
yeah,
understand? Where we heading? Where we heading?
I think if you there are some bits, like if you see, and then it's controversial for other reasons, but there's a school called Alpha School. They target people in like in more in high school and so on. But if you see the Alpha School students, and like there's, it's controversial because of other reasons that I don't think really have to do with the education. But if you see the Alpha School model, is they compress hours long of lecturing into much shorter sort of deliveries. Let's say, like, if you're in a class right now and you're lecturing, who are you teaching to? The one who knows the most, or the one who knows the least, or the one who knows the medium, amount?
The one
It's
who know nothing. I
okay.
teach the one who know nothing.
Okay, so then the one who
And
knows.
I'm able to make him knows the subject with a percent according to his ability.
Okay, so that's very honorable and very admirable. But then the one who knows the most is, of course, it's like, well, if I already know that, then maybe that person ought to be given a harder level task, right? So I think if you see with the lecturing, for example, the lecturing becomes truly personalized, right? So now everybody's being taught according to their level of understanding. And then with that, if you see this Alpha School example, right, they condense the lecturing into very sort of small snippets. And then the rest of the time, the kids they're building projects, right? So, but yeah, no, this is very interesting.
Yeah, no, I was going to say it's more personalized learning is much more adaptive learning so that, let's say that the student who is far ahead doesn't get too bored, where the student at the lower spectrum is still learning. And so that's the biggest challenge that faculty members have, is when you're presented a classroom full of students at all different levels, how do you plateau?
Yeah,
I want to tell you my scaring point. I don't see any schools going to be in the next 10 years. You understand? It's just started when we had the COVID. It started with the Zoom. Teacher was a student in a Zoom. And then now, AI. In the next 10 years, and mark my word, my name is Michael Bolles. There will not going to be schools. Thank you,
Yeah.
sir.
Well, thank you, Michael, for all the questions. We do have to close. Thank you for everyone joining us today. This has been recorded. And thank you, Miguel, for taking the time to join us today. I really appreciate you. And again, it's been a pleasure And we'll see when we can have you again very soon. So everyone, thank you again for joining us. And this has been recorded, and you can also find the recording on our YouTube channel. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much. We could have talked for like another 8 hours. So this is great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you,
Thank
Miguel.
you.
Bye bye. See you.
Take care.